Well, you win some, you lose some. Kansas falls in Ames against Iowa State, 74-56. We'll break it down coming up next. This is the Paid Podcast, a live edition of the show here on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to you and yours if you have one. If you don't, like me, then you have Kansas basketball. But Kansas basketball, if you're like me, broke your heart today. So that's what happened here this afternoon for Kansas against Iowa State, 74-56. I'm Nick Springer, of course, here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Kansas drops to Iowa State, and Dave says sad choo-choo noises. Yeah, this one derailed the national title train a little bit for Kansas. A humbling game for KU, and a game where Kansas, quite frankly, played very poorly for a very, very large majority of it. Iowa State went on a couple very big runs at the end of the first half and to start the second half that basically KO'd Kansas. A forgettable game in Ames, definitely for KU.
Yeah, I think, when we look back at this one, like Iowa State hit 7 of 8 threes at one point. That'll happen. You don't hate so much on that, like especially if they're making, defended 30-footers and the Momcilovic fadeaway three. You're just kind of like, that happens sometimes. Where Kansas takes blame in this one, Nick, is really in that first half and putting itself behind the 8 ball, where it didn't have a chance to respond to Iowa State shooting really well in that situation because you were already down 10 points. And the reason you were down 10 points is you got clocked from an energy level, right? You turned the ball over. You weren't strong enough with the ball. And yeah, Iowa State was really physical to the point that you probably could have called about 35,000 cylinder fouls. That's what you're going to get in Ames. And I don't want anybody blaming the refs or anything like that. It's like when you would go to West Virginia when it was press Virginia. You just had to go in knowing it's going to be a different type of ball game. It's going to be physical. You're going to have to be strong with the ball. And that's what you're going to have to play through. And they didn't. And they got beat on the offensive glass. They turned it over. Went on, another one of their dry spells. Omarco hits the three kind of a little bit late, but even then, you get the ball back with the chance to make it single digits, maybe give yourself some momentum heading into the half, and you throw the ball into the 6th row. And that was just kind of Kansas's day. And so, yes, you look at Iowa State sort of pulling away when they hit all those shots, but ultimately, Nick, if you don't play like that in the first half, Iowa State can hit all those shots. And when Kansas is making its move in the second half, they're feeling game pressure because all of a sudden then you're cutting it to 5 points. You're cutting it to 3 points. There's not still that double-digit buffer in there. And so Kansas really, I think, lost this one in the first half. And then obviously Iowa State just shot lights out to stretch that thing out and give themselves enough cushion in this one.
When we previewed this matchup earlier in the week, kind of talking about what Kansas did against Iowa State the last time these two teams played it on Fieldhouse, the big thing that you and I both highlighted was the fact that in that first game against Iowa State, Kansas did an excellent job of taking care of the ball. In that first game, Kansas had 9 turnovers in the entirety of the first game. In the first half of this game against Iowa State today, they had 10 turnovers.
Yep.
So they had more turnovers in the first half of this game today than they had in the entirety of their previous matchup against Iowa State. And that really sums up a lot of the issues that they dealt with, especially in the first half. And honestly, for the first 4.5 minutes or so of this game, Iowa State was not playing well at all. Both teams were looking pretty tight to start. The problem is Iowa State was playing terribly, and you look up the scoreboard, and it was 6-4. You had a 2-point lead at that point if you're Kansas. So you really, really failed to jump on them early when they were playing a little bit tight and not fully into the game. And then after that, the entirety of that first half for Kansas was really just an absolute train wreck. I mean, you end up going up 20-16, and then Iowa State rips off a 20-2 run over that spans basically the last 4 or 5 minutes of that first half. They end up going up by a significant margin at the end of the half, and that kind of that really felt like the game right there, right? And then obviously Iowa State comes out and really, really delivers a KO by shooting they made their first 6 threes, I think, to start the second half. And at that point, the game was pretty much over. So Yeah, I agree. I think the first half was definitely where you could look at it and say, man, okay, sure, Iowa State, makes all those shots in the second half, but if you could have gotten off to a little bit of a quicker start in the first half, jumped on Iowa State a little bit when they weren't playing as great, and then if you had done anything to not turn the ball over in the first half and also get some, first shot rebounds, Iowa State hit a couple threes off of offensive rebounds as well.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the first half. So that was really frustrating. And then and then truthfully, without Melvin Council, you're down by 25. I mean, Melvin Council kind of hits 3 threes in the first half that really kind of sparked you a little bit to keep you, somewhat in that game in the first half. So, yeah, very frustrating half, I think, for Kansas in the first half. And then obviously in the second half, Iowa State just hit a bunch of threes and really separated from there. And Kansas didn't have much of an answer. And so this is a game where I think you tweeted about it, Kevin, during the game. Kansas this season has proven to be a mentally tough team. And today that was not the case. They flustered. They looked overwhelmed by Iowa State's defensive pressure. Listen, I am totally with people who want to talk about the fouls, the officiating situation, because yes, especially in the first half, the number of fouls that were being committed that weren't being called was unbelievable. I mean, it was practically a football game at times in the first half with some of these guys getting tackled. But setting that aside, Kansas did not respond at all to that pressure from Iowa State. They got flustered. They were clearly rattled. They did not have much of an answer. A comment here from Big Sky that says, KU just got punked today. They were south outside of Flory, all of Council, but needed someone how to slow down at times. Those 2 bad games in a row from DP and Trey's and missing 2. So, yeah, I think that's the overarching theme here is that for the really for the first time this season, Kansas was not mentally tough. They were not they were not up to the task, right? There's been games this season where Kansas has lost, but they were still showed resilience and mental toughness, right? I think about the UConn game where that was just a pretty tough game.
The Duke game, you're still around with 5 minutes left, despite playing shorthanded. Right. Even the games that they lost early in Big 12 play, you got beat on the glass, you got bullied a little bit in the post, but there was still some mental toughness to kind of hang around in those games, even though they ultimately lost that one. In this one, you didn't really see movement until you had, second team guys out there late in the game. And I think, I thought, sorry, I forgot who dropped it. I think it was Matthew brought in the point about Iowa State's double teams. That was a huge part of their strategy. And what KU was doing was going right into those double teams and repeatedly getting the ball in the corners when they're going to be doubling in the corner, but not having a plan for it, right? You should know if you're going into the corner, another guy's coming, I need to be ready to move this ball. Repeatedly trying to dribble into a gap, knowing that they're going to close that gap and you're going to dribble into bodies. And then one thing that Iowa State did that I thought was really smart and really shook KU up a lot was they double teamed Bryson Tiller, because Tiller has been a nice creator for Flory with that whole little high-low thing that they have going on. The second Tiller touched the ball, it was like that. And Tiller wasn't ready for it. He committed 4 turnovers. There were also a few turnovers, Nick, where it seemed like they had the right idea and just didn't execute. The Council play right at the end of the half where he threw the ball into the stands was one of those, right? Like he had an open guy out there. That's not an easy pass to make under pressure. If he makes it, you're getting a wide open look and a really good look, but you didn't execute it. And so to your point, when we talk about toughness, like, yes, there's physical toughness, but there's also mental toughness and just being able to execute against the flow of a game. And that was something that Kansas has typically had. Even when they've been down, they've responded and they've been able to kind of flip momentum on its head, right? Think about the Arizona game. You get down double digits. It's like, oh my God, here we go again. And you snap your fingers and it's a 4-point game because they responded. This is one where they didn't have the mental toughness to sort of flip things whenever things started getting out of hand. And so things kind of snowballed in a way that we haven't really seen with this team.
Yeah, the Bryson Tiller doubling, I thought was a great call out by you, because that was something that I noticed as well. I mean, Iowa State made that an emphasis, and Bryson Tiller looked like he'd never seen a double team in his life a couple times. Yeah. And that was really, really unfortunate for Kansas and led to several turnovers in the first half for them. Was they were just not ready for that at all. They were obviously playing against Darren Peterson very aggressively on defense, really running him off of situations and, frustrating him as well. We can talk more about Darren Peterson if you want, because there was some pregame antics involving social media that I think got people's attention, and then obviously ends up not having the best game either today. So, we can talk about that too. But yeah, overall, I think the commenter here, who was it? Big Sky, said that, outside of Flory, everybody was pretty soft. Melvin ends up with 15 points on 6 of 11. Again, he hit 3 threes in the first half, really kind of helped you out. Flory ends with 11 and 13.
He didn't take care of the ball like you would have hoped, though. And I'm not just talking about the turnovers. He picked up his dribble way too many times, and that was a team-wide thing. They were picking up the dribble, 30 feet, 35 feet away from the basket under pressure. You have to find a way to keep your dribble alive. Otherwise, you're not only are you putting yourself in a position to potentially turn it over, you're also taking seconds off the shot clock. And we saw Kansas at times in this one, Nick, Flory wound up shooting a 3 at the end of a possession. Like you weren't always getting great shots because of the fact that you were picking up your dribble, you were putting yourself in tough spots, you were putting yourself in position to get doubled without knowing what you were going to do when the double came. And so it was just a really frustrating game from that standpoint, in that there didn't seem to be a concerted plan. And if there was one, it didn't seem to be well executed.
Matthew in the live chat says, one more player meeting. Maybe. You never know. Melvin Council did an interview with Jeff Gibson from Field of 68 and said that his favorite moment of the season was the player meeting after the West Virginia game. It's like, your favorite moment of the season was after the worst loss of the season? Like, that was a really funny answer. But I mean, to me, again, I think the biggest disappointing things about today's game was, one, just a complete lack of mental toughness from Kansas that we haven't really seen from them as a team yet this season. They didn't really have a response. Iowa State, was being aggressive, and Kansas really allowed them to dictate and never really fought back, I think, mentally. And then the second aspect, I think, kind of like we talked about, was there wasn't really much of an adjustment from Kansas to what Iowa State was doing defensively either. And that was kind of frustrating to watch. Iowa State just kind of rinse and repeat with those double teams, and Kansas just not really able to have any sort of adjustment to that, either turnovers or just poor execution.
Yeah, I think there's that. And then when they did get open looks, a lot of times they didn't go in, right? When you look at the fact that Darren Peterson in the second half got about as 2 of the most open 3-point looks that he'll probably ever have, and he didn't knock him down. And I'm not blaming Darren Peterson for that. I'm just saying, a team on one side is hitting, step back threes on the baseline, hitting tough shots from 30 feet. And then when you actually do execute your offense and get a good shot and it doesn't go in, that's pretty disheartening as well, when you don't get rewarded for that. I will say, and we'll get to big picture stuff later in the show. That's usually how we kind of go. I know some of you guys are talking about Adarius up there is talking about 4-1 through the hard stretch. I'm sure we'll get to that point. But to be fair, in this game, I think there were a few sort of micro positives. I'd like to see the way that Cole Rosario attacked the basket. If he's not going to make shots, like, put the ball on the floor and get to the basket. And I think there were some other guys. El Marco, I thought, played remarkably well. And some people are going to say, oh, he had 8 points, whatever. I think he had 1 turnover. And for as much as he was on the ball in this game, El Marco was one of their best players today. And so there's a lot of negative things that you can take from this game. And certainly we'll talk more about those. But there were a few things that maybe popped a little bit.
Yeah, I thought El Marco did play very well, especially, by the way, looking at the live stats here, Kevin, El Marco was not credited with a turnover. So
there you go. 0 turnovers.
Yeah. So 0 turnovers for El Marco. Dave in the chat says, hey, Cole finally scored in Big 12 play, got to the free throw line and was able to score at the line there, which was good to see. Somebody mentioned Trey White earlier. Yeah, Trey White has hit a bit of a wall, really over the past probably 4 or 5 games now. He has collectively not been what he was, when you think about like the start of conference play, and that will probably need to change. I think I talked about it, when we previewed this game earlier in the week, that Trey White was going to be the guy that I was going to be keeping an eye on. Well, there wasn't much to watch for him in this game. He only took the 3 shots, only scored 2 points, both at the free throw line, and wasn't really much of a factor. So that is a little alarming, because I think Kansas had really come to lean on him as sort of that primary. I'm going to say this phrase, Kevin. Trey White, I think, had been leaned on by Kansas as the primary secondary scorer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
So, with DP in and out of the lineup, I think without a doubt, your two primary guys have been Flory and Melvin. But then Trey White was your next, secondary scorer that you were kind of leaning on to get, some production out of. And that hasn't been there for him over the past couple of games, and especially in this game against Iowa State. So that is a little alarming. I'm going to trust in Trey White being a veteran player, that he's going to be able to kind of work through this as we get into sort of the home stretch of the season. But something to keep an eye on has been some of his continued struggles. And quite frankly, Trey White didn't play much in the second half. It came out in the pregame radio interview with Bill Self that he said that Trey White had a infected root canal.
Root canal, yeah, that doesn't sound
removed
like
earlier in the week, that he hadn't been practicing, and that he'd only practiced, I think, yesterday, basically. So maybe if you want to give Trey White a little bit of a pass for this game specifically because of that, maybe you can do that, because he didn't really play much in the second half. You wonder if maybe he was, dealing with that. I mean, I have to assume he probably had some pain related to that,
or if nothing else, just a little bit of a lack of conditioning from not practicing.
Right.
Basically. But no, I mean, the thing with Trey White is, Nick, like, we don't expect him to be a nuclear shooter, and he was that for a while. I mean, for a while there, he was shooting so well that when he took a three-pointer and he missed it, you were surprised, because he was shooting so well. The thing that I want to see from Trey White is the aggression. I want to see him be aggressive on offense. I want to see him continue to stack up fouls, because that was something he had done at a really high level for a large portion of the season, and he's a terrific free throw shooter. And so if he goes to the free throw line, not only are you drawing fouls on the other team, but you're putting yourself in a position to continue to score points. And how many scorers have we seen talk over the years like, hey, if I'm 2 for 7, I'm going to go try and get to the free throw line and kind of rewire things a little bit. That could be what Trey White needs. Not necessarily a game where he rolls out of bed and makes 5 threes, but a game where maybe he gets to the free throw line a bunch, and that's part of what sort of resets the clock a little bit. I'm right there with you in that I'm not worried about Trey White. I don't think it's a long-term concern of mine where I'm sitting here saying, hey, Trey won't get there. He's been playing for 35 years at this point at the college level, and under a lot of different coaches. But I do think that Trey White needs to get back to the other stuff, right? He needs to not be a catch and shoot guy. He needs to be a guy that is tangibly taking effort to be involved offensively, to draw fouls, to drive into the lane and do things like that. And so I think that Trey White, if he's aggressive in those ways, the shot will start falling again. He's not going to just go over the rest of the year. And I will knock on wood before I say that, so it doesn't happen. But I do think that for all the concern about, man, he's not making threes right now, I think I'm more worried about Trey White, doing the other things. And you think about the fact that he was scoring at all levels when things were really going well for Trey White this year.
Matthew in the chat says back to foul baiting, please.
Exactly.
Listen, if you're a free throw merchant, but it works,
free throw
who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Keep doing it. Maybe that is something that he should look back into. And then you had the whole Darren Peterson thing where we talked about the Bill Self comments from Thursday. And then overnight, if you're a social media guy, he switched his profile picture on Twitter to basically a Michael Myers picture.
Yeah.
Maybe to insinuate that he was going to be, like the Grim Reaper coming for Iowa State today.
You can't kill Michael Myers. Like, that's the joke. Like, you knock him out of like a 12th story window and you go down and check and the body's not there and Michael Myers is still wandering around killing people. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you can't kill Michael Myers. And so I think the reference was, well, you're not gonna be able to kill me either type of deal.
Well, unfortunately, Iowa State kind of put him in his place today. I mean, DP was 10 points.
He had some great looks that didn't go down, and it's a little unfortunate because he went up, I think, 3 for 10, right? And he had a couple wide open threes that if he makes those, you're like, oh, he's got 16 points on 10 shots, not bad. But I mean, that's one of those things. It's a make or miss game, and especially for a guy like Darren Peterson.
Yeah, and Iowa State obviously had a very aggressive defensive strategy against him, right? I mean, they were all running at him all over with players, but certainly
he split a double team at one point just beautifully, and then winds up picking up a charge because the third guy rotated over. It was a great defensive effort from Iowa State. Like, seriously, I know that this is a Kansas show. We'll talk about like the things that went wrong for Kansas, all of that stuff. So much credit to Iowa State because they played defense like their hair was on fire. They got on the glass. Obviously, they had that terrific stretch where they made just everything from the outside in the second half. This is a really good basketball team, and this is a team that can beat you even if you do play pretty well. It's just Kansas did not play well in this one.
Yeah, very poor game from Kansas, but certainly Iowa State, I think, deserves a tip of the cap for what they did to really put Kansas in a blender offensively for a good chunk of the first half and into the second half as well. And yeah, they're a top 10 team, obviously, probably going to be a team that's going to be a candidate to make the second weekend as well of the NCAA tournament. So, and also this was, I think, in a lot of ways, probably a must-win game for Iowa State after what happened to them earlier in the week with the loss against TCU. So couple that all together, plus you're playing it on the road in Ames, and this was the outcome for Kansas in a game where they didn't play well. And really, just to add on to that, the point would be, Kansas plays a C- D+ game, and they did not in any way disrupt what Iowa State was doing, and did not make Iowa State play a worse game with them too. So that was really what impacted them also. All right, I don't take a break. I saw some people talking about, sort of big picture stuff. I want to get into that. But Kevin, I had a thought, okay?
Uh-oh.
Sometimes my mind just comes up with these ideas and I just think of something, okay? I had a thought today at halftime, okay? Well, I want to ask you a question.
All right.
What do the officials do at halftime?
That's a fair question.
What do they do?
I don't
know. Are they looking at replays of like calls they missed or didn't make in the first?
I don't think you usually do that. I think they basically take a halftime break.
They just go and have a sandwich and hang out, or I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're running around too, Nick. You gotta hydrate. You gotta take a break. It's.
I'm just posing a question. I'm
just saying I don't think they're out there eating sandwiches when you got to go out and run for a whole nother half. I mean, they don't get subbed out, Nick. The officials do not get subbed out. They got to be moving all half.
Listen, I just had this thought, and I was like, what do the officials do? I'm assuming they have like an official locker room, just like the players do. What do they do? Like, what are they doing at halftime? Just, I don't know. Just a food for thought, I guess.
A buddy of mine who did high school reffing said that was usually when he got cussed out the most, was at halftime. so I don't know where he's at getting cussed out like for calls and stuff, but apparently that is his time to be subject to the fan and coach abuse. Call it both ways.
Listen, I'm not asking that in an accusatory manner. If any official happens to be listening to the show, I'm just more asking like, hey man, like you have 15 minutes like their players do. What are you doing? What do what's going on? I'm just curious.
I would just love it if there was a head ref that gave him a pep talk at halftime.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Like Tom, you've been missing calls all half. Like, we got to get this under control.
Yeah,
Bob,
Doug,
get further up on the baseline when you see this because you're missing the play under the basket.
Right. Like, Doug, you suck, bro. Lock in. Come on. You're missing calls. You're out of position. What are we doing? Yeah.
Tommy, the only reason that the fans haven't killed us today is you've been really good. Keep that up in the second half and we got a chance.
Maybe we should get a ref on the show and just ask him that. And
I think that's legit. That's legit.
I mean, we're nice to refs. We're not too mean to refs typically. Yeah. Just if you're a ref, don't go back and see what I said to you. See what I said about the KU Texas Tech game. Just don't watch that. But in today's game, today's game was something else with the officiating in that there was no officiating, at least in the first half. I mean, it was a complete free for all. And then, I guess, like you said, it's kind of what you expect when you go to a place like Iowa State.
You have to know that it's going to be like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you can't use that as an excuse. It's going to be like that in Ames, just like teams know that you're going to get certain treatment at Allen Fieldhouse, like we talked about when they went to Lubbock, that they were going to get that kind of treatment. Those things happen when you go on the road in the Big 12.
All right, let's actually take a break now that I've derailed us for a good couple minutes there. Talking about talking about the officials. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some big picture stuff as it relates to this game. What's next? Give some more takeaways. We'll do all that coming up next.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
This is the Payee Podcast, a live edition of the show on our YouTube channel here on Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. After admittedly a tough game for Kansas. Somebody in the comments here earlier, Kevin, said that according to one of the analytics websites, this was KU's worst game of the season. Yeah, according to Nick Palm, this was one of KU's worst games of the season. Nick Palm said this was one of KU's worst games. As they lose 74-56. But if you're here joining us and if you're enjoying the show, be sure to do three things. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're getting pretty close to 600 subscribers. Really appreciate you. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep striving for bigger numbers. 1,600, 1,700, 1,800, 2,000, 20,000. We're not going to stop. We're not going to stop, people. So please subscribe to the channel. You can also like the video and continue to share your comments. Appreciate those of you hopping in the live chat here and sharing your thoughts and joining in on the conversation. Dave asks, has anyone actually interviewed a ref? They have what do they, Kevin? What do they call
pool reporters? Yeah. So when there's a controversial call in either basketball or football, a lot of times they make them available to a single reporter who is designated as the pool reporter. So refs don't have like press conferences, but like you think of like CJ Moore at the Athletic, maybe for like a KU game, will be designated as the pool reporter. And so right. CJ will get to go and he'll get a couple questions with the head official, and he'll say, hey, this is what we saw here. Hey, this is what we do here. But it's not something that's usually videotaped or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, to call it a press conference would not be the right way to describe it. It's
you more get a statement to your questions.
Right. It's more like it's more like a PR thing. It's like, here is a post-game statement from, whoever the official was, on behalf of all the officials in the game, basically, of what they decided on certain plays. Yep. So you do see that from officials sometimes, but you certainly don't see them doing like full-blown press conferences or like post-game interviews or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know. Food for thought there. Maybe we should have one on the show or something. All right. I saw some comments here earlier in the show about, this game and kind of the feeling after the game for KU. I think I had actually specifically asked you, Kevin, hey, if Kansas loses today, how would you be feeling? And you kind of shared that you would not be feeling too differently.
I believe I said unless they got absolutely hammered.
Which, I don't know. I mean, they were getting hammered at times in this game. Yeah. I don't know if you would say that they got absolutely hammered. I mean, it was obviously a thorough victory for Iowa State, like a resounding win. But it is what it is. David Reed in the chat says, sometimes you're the windshield and sometimes you're the bug. KU is always the bug in Ames. Yeah, that's 4 straight losses for KU in Ames, by the way. Their last
Have you guys ever seen Meet Joe Black? Like, he's Brad Pitt's character's like walking across the street and he gets hit by a car going one way and then gets hit by a car going the other way. That's kind of what it feels like. Like, not even a single windshield. Like, he gets hit by 2 different cars, basically.
Big Sky in the chat says, guys, I'm not worried about this game because I never expected KU to win it. When is the last time they won there? Well, I can tell you, it was 2021, I think, was the last time they won there. With that said, don't lose to Oklahoma State. Yeah, so that's kind of the bigger picture. We spent a lot of time talking about this stretch of games for Kansas. And if you were to rewind the clock a month and say, okay, over this stretch of games at the beginning of February, you're going to go 4-1. I think everybody would have said, yes, absolutely. Take that and run it all the way to the bank, right? And that's exactly what KU's done. They've gone 4-1 over this stretch of 5 games that we kind of talked about, right? They beat BYU at home, then they beat a Texas Tech with a game-winning shot from DP on the road. They beat Utah, they beat Arizona to give them their first loss. Now you lose against Iowa State. You would take that, right? You would absolutely take that. Yeah. And sitting here now, I think you still take that if you're Kansas, because you've shown that you can beat some of the top teams in the country, including Arizona. To me, big picture wise, like I kind of look at this from two different perspectives. The first perspective is, okay, we're talking, how am I feeling about Kansas in terms of the postseason after this run? Fantastic, right? You went 4-1 over this run, feel pretty good. Probably going to end up, I think you set yourself up almost certainly to be at worst probably a 4 seed if you're Kansas at this point, and that's if you lose more games. You're probably more likely going to end up being a 3 seed or a 2 seed. Fantastic, sign me up, great. I think the other sort of long-term way to look at this is from the Big 12 title race, which we talked a lot about heading into this game, which is if you would have won this game today against Iowa State, you would have effectively made a 3-horse race for the Big 12 championship. That didn't happen. And so now you're kind of stuck in this. Now you're back 2 games behind Houston and Arizona, and Iowa State is now pulled even with you. So it kind of muddies things up there. So if that's something that you're focused on, this loss hurts a little bit more than I think it otherwise would. But again, you went 4-1 over the stretch. So you got to feel pretty good, I think, about where KU sits despite the loss today.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Long term, I'm not worried about it. And I think that this is the sort of thing that I don't want to say can be motivating necessarily, but it's the sort of thing that Bill Self can go and say, hey, maybe you guys were reading your press clips a little bit. Maybe you thought you arrived after Arizona or whatever. This is a team that is their level of success, Nick, their margin for error is not as big as some teams that Bill Self has had. And so they need to be the team that plays with their hair on fire. They need to be the team with the better effort. They need to be the team that's flying around and is doing all the right things defensively. And so this gives Bill Self a point of reference to be able to go back to the team and say, hey, remember, like, this is what happens when you don't play like that. And so from a long-term perspective, no, like I'm not worried about it. You get thumped sometimes. Even some of Bill Self's best teams have gotten absolutely thumped. The national title team got absolutely destroyed at home by Kentucky in late January. And so when you look at that part of it, this isn't a game that changes, I don't think, the long-term outlook of KU of, I don't know that they're capable of reaching a Final Four or capable of winning a national title game. I think you go back and you say, if you aren't going to play the way that you played against Arizona, with the scrap you played against Texas Tech, with the way that you've played against BYU, if you're not going to play that way, this is what can happen to you, especially when you play a really good, really connected basketball team. And you think about it in the NCAA tournament, Nick, there's not really bad teams in the NCAA tournament. I mean, yeah, you can have a team that winds up not being so great that wins their conference tournament and gets in, but that's one round. And so you have to win probably 5 games against really good basketball teams. And so you need to be consistent, in what you do all the way through. Today was not one of those games that you could circle and say, this was consistently Jayhawk basketball. Now, if they had battled and scrapped and clawed and lost by 3, then I think you would almost go to the locker room and be like, we lost in Ames. It's a tough game, but, you guys continued to show that this is who you are on an everyday basis. What they were today is what they need to not be at any point in the NCAA tournament if they're going to make a run.
Dave in the chat asks, Nick, is that a Jayhawk hammer on your wall? Yes, and actually it's a Thor hammer. It is a 3D. It's a 3D printed Thor hammer that my grandma got me for Christmas. Yeah, to add to the wall there. So maybe Kansas needs the Thor hammer to get back on track. I don't know. Maybe. Matthew also in the chat says, is Big 12 out of reach now? Probably. No. The short answer is no. The long answer is maybe. When you look at the standings with K losing today, so Kansas drops to 9-3 in the conference with their losses against UCF, West Virginia, and then today against Iowa State. And Arizona and Houston are both presumably going to become 11-1 today. Houston is playing K-State at home. Arizona is playing at home against Texas Tech, which Arizona, I guess, could lose, but probably won't. So presumably after today, the standings would be Arizona and Houston both at 11-1. And now with Kansas losing and Iowa State winning, obviously today, Kansas and Iowa State will both be at 9-3. So essentially, you're 2 games back of Houston and Arizona, and Iowa State has pulled equal with you. So no, it's not out of the realm of possibility. If you kind of cross-reference the schedules of some of the top teams, all these teams have to play each other, right? Arizona is going to play KU again at home, and they're going to play Houston as well. On top of the fact they play Texas Tech today, they also have to play BYU too. So, okay, could Houston lose a game? Oh, and Arizona also plays Iowa State at home too, also at the end of the season. So, I think with today's loss, now it becomes, all right, you're certainly going to have to beat Houston at home. And you're probably, let's just assume you're going to lose at Arizona. Let's just make that a base assumption. Okay, right? If that's the case and you win the rest of your games, that would put you with 4 losses in conference. So that means you would need Houston and Arizona to both lose 3 more games, which is not impossible, but I think certainly feels a bit unlikely at this point, right? So
it's not quite a Lloyd Christmas chance, like so you're saying so you're saying there's a chance, but at the same time, it is, the sun's starting to set a little bit. So, I mean, you gotta get home. The thing that would make it interesting and obviously put KU in a better spot would be if Tech can pull something out today where you didn't lose any ground on Arizona in that situation. That would really help a lot. And Tech, I mean, the thing with Tech is you just don't want to catch Tech on the wrong night. Like when Tech plays really well, Tech can beat anybody in the country, and they can beat them at home or away. They damn near won at Houston earlier this year. And so, they aren't going to be intimidated in that game. It's still going to be really tough to beat Arizona. But at the same time, if the Tech shows up where you're getting a whole bunch of points from top end, where you're getting the performances from all of their guys, the outside shooting, etc., then Kansas, you're feeling a little bit better about where KU sits if they're able to do that. Now, if Arizona wins this game, and obviously it's at Zona, then you're not quite at Lloyd Christmas chance, but you're still at a point where it's like, well, it's not looking too likely right now.
Stormy Cyclone in the chat, who I'm assuming is an Iowa State fan, says Danny Manning's last loss was at Hilton. That didn't stop them. I was there. Shout out to you, Stormy Cyclone. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. Obviously, Danny and the Miracles were on to win the national championship that year, so that's food for thought. You mentioned the Kentucky loss in 2022. I mean, imagine telling somebody after that game that team was going to win the national championship. I don't think that anybody would have even believed you after that game. They lost by 40 that game, right? It was. Or close to 40?
KU? Yeah. No, it wound up being the teens or 20s, wasn't it?
I don't know. Let me look. Now we're doing some live podcasting.
In 2022?
It was 8. Okay, they lost by 18.
Yeah. Dang, Nick.
Didn't they play Kentucky and lost huge?
Former champions, KU champions, and just craps on them repeatedly.
Kevin, didn't they play a game against Kentucky where they lost big?
The 2014-2015 game at Champions Classic. The Kentucky team that went 38-1. I think they won by 30.
Right. They lost 72-40 in 2015. Okay.
But
my apologies.
But KU still has the 89 game where they hung 155 on Kentucky. So take that.
Yep. Yeah, so I think as it pertains to the postseason, this was a tough loss for Kansas, but it's one that you chalk up to playing poorly. Iowa State was going to be playing, with their hair on fire after the way that they lost against TCU earlier in the week. It's going to be tough. Stormy Cyclone asks, how do Kansas fans feel about what is going on in Manhattan with Jerome Tang? Love it. Think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. Listen. I will say this, though. It is awesome. It's great. It's fun. But there comes a certain point where watching, a rival, basically implode that badly, you do start to feel a little bit of pity at some point. Like, man, bummer. But I think it's great. I'm loving every second of it. And I was going to save this rant for when we preview KU K-State, because KU's going to play K-State at home on senior night to end the season. But I'll give you a little bit of tease of it now. I will just say this as it relates to that game. Whatever number Kansas beats Kansas State by on that day, it will not be enough. I want to beat them by more. 40, 50, 60. I don't care. I want to be
you want to be the coach in Remember the Titans saying,
yes,
run it up, leave no doubt.
Yes. I want to run it up. I want to be the most toxic, most just aggressive, score as many points, beat them by as many points as possible. Whatever number they win by, it will not be enough. I will not be satisfied. I want to beat them so bad that they're forced to close their program, shut down the program. I want it to be that embarrassing when they play Kansas and Allen Fieldhouse in March. So that's my that's a little bit of a tease of what I have cooked up for when we get to that game. But yes, I feel very strongly about the state of that program and where Kansas is at. Please beat them by 100 points or more. That would make me very happy if that happened. So Matthew asks, has Darren ever been dominant and the best player in an entire game? Matthew, you're going to hate this answer. The short answer is no. The long answer is maybe.
The funny thing is, so Ken Pom lists the MVP of a game, and it's the MVP for, like, there's only one MVP for both teams. So there's only one guy. So it can be the opposing team or it can be your team. And Peterson was the MVP in 3 straight games, but you're not going to love this part of it. 2 of them were losses. So it was that stretch, actually, when they first came back after the holiday and they started 1-2 in Big 12 play. Those were the 3 games that Darren Peterson was MVP. They were all back to back. And so you had the loss to UCF. You had the win over TCU, where obviously he didn't play in the overtime, didn't play in the comeback, really, which is the funny thing about it. They came almost all the way back without him, and then he does get fouled, hit the big free throws to send it to overtime. Didn't play in overtime, but he was still the MVP for that game. And then he was MVP in West Virginia, which they lost. So they are 1-2 in the 3 games that Ken Pom declared Peterson as the MVP for those games.
Mr. Golfing Buddy in the chat says, this is the kind of game where you would think DP would be a difference maker for when the offense collapses, but it didn't happen. Yeah, I think that's kind of been sort of the tightrope that Kansas has been walking with, Darren Peterson out of the lineup, right? And something we've kind of been discussing over the course of the season as well, where there has been games this season where the offense has collapsed because Darren Peterson's out there and all the other guys just kind of stand around and say, okay, DP, go do your thing. There's been games where we've seen them be more, cohesive together as a team, and the offense has looked very good. Then there's been games like today where Kansas could have used a guy to sort of pick them up, and that would have been Darren Peterson, presumably, and it didn't really happen. So yeah. Well, and you think about the BYU game where he was just absolutely a flamethrower, right? I mean,
and then he sat out. BYU did make its move, but at the same time, Peterson was a huge part of the reason that KU got up 80 billion points on BYU in the first place. So that would maybe be one of the ones that I would consider. But look, guys, they're still figuring out how to play with him because they haven't had that much time with him. And so, I've seen people tweet like KU is better right now without Darren Peterson than they are with him. And I can't necessarily argue that hard against it, Nick. I think that their ceiling is significantly higher with Darren Peterson. It's just you haven't had a lot of time with them working together where you see the chemistry, you see the ball movement. And the unfortunate thing is, I think before the ankle injury and the illness, I think they were starting to get there. You started to see more of the cutting, more of the ball movement, more of the different things that's KU's normal offense. And Peterson was finding success within that offense. Whereas I think when Kansas hasn't been used to playing with him, it's almost been like Kansas has 4 guys over here and 1 guy over here. And I think that the more they play with him, the more that'll all kind of come together. It's just you really hope that he doesn't miss time for any other reason, really, because they need to get used to playing with him.
Matthew says, will he be the best player when he gets fully integrated? Yes, absolutely. I mean, he's going to be the potential number 1 pick in the NBA draft. He's definitely
not most valuable, though, Nick. That's Floyd. I'm being 100% honest because
I don't disagree with you.
Because, I mean, at the college level, if you have a big man who is a shutdown defender and can rim protect, he is worth his weight in gold because the court isn't spread out like it is in the NBA. And so you look at like Doak in 2020, he was the most valuable player in college basketball in my opinion, that year because he was so efficient offensively, and defensively, he just shut off the water whenever anybody got into the paint. Flaherty is that kind of rim protector, but at the same time, he's a switchable defender, can switch onto guards, all of those different things. And so when you add how efficient he is offensively, today was not an efficient day for Flaherty offensively, but when you add how efficient Flaherty typically is offensively and his level of defensive impact, I think Flaherty is the most valuable player on this team. Of course, Melvin Council is kind of the heartbeat too. So
shout out to Stormy Cyclone, who says you guys do a great job. Thanks, you, Stormy Cyclone. And we might be seeing Iowa State again, potentially in the Big 12 tournament. Or honestly,
that would be awesome because you have a 21-point win at Allen Fieldhouse and 18-point win at Hilton. Play them on a neutral court and let's see what happens. I would absolutely love that.
Well, and we obviously know that Iowa State fans do typically show up pretty big in Kansas City. So it's not like that would be just an automatic, 90-10 KU home game like some of the Big 12 tournament games are for Kansas. So would be, a real neutral site environment. Could be a lot of fun. So that would actually be
you say neutral site, Nick, but I also believe that when it's KU Iowa State, the Iowa State fans are louder. And that may be a controversial take. That may get me chased off of the Pay Heed podcast, but I actually think that when KU and Iowa State play, it may be 50-50, but I feel like the Iowa State fans, they really bring the heat at T-Mobile, I guess it is now. So it makes for a super fun atmosphere.
Kevin calling out the KU fans. Oh, boy. Better get loud.
I thought I was more complimenting the Iowa State fans, but,
I mean, I guess. Fine. Sure. Whatever. And then Matthew also –
nobody's business.
Also, Matthew has the $1 million question here about DP. He said, how long a consistent player will it take for him to get fully integrated? That really is $1 million question, right? Because I think we've seen it at times this season, right? Like the dream is for Darren Peterson to be playing full speed and playing at his, how we know he can play, while also guys like Melvin Council and Trey White still being aggressive offensively and being involved. Like that's kind of the dream. And we haven't seen that really very much. So I don't know. That's the main.
I thought you were going to answer Matthew's question the same way you'd answered the previous ones, like long answer, no; short answer, maybe.
Well, okay. Matthew said that. Listen,
I said reverse that, but
listen, I said the short answer, no; long answer, maybe is not longer than no. Listen,
no.
No is 2 letters.
I was looking forward to you hitting it again, and you let the pitch go by.
Listen, so. No is 2 letters, and maybe is what, 5 letters, 6 letters. So the short answer is no, the long answer is maybe.
Yeah, that's fair. And plus maybe requires nuance and all that fun stuff. But no, I mean we're getting off track here, Nick. Again,
we are.
The point is that, KU came out of this stretch. We said heading in, you wanted to be 3-2 with how tough this stretch was. You figured you would probably beat Utah at Allen Fieldhouse. You hoped you would beat Utah at Allen Fieldhouse. And you wanted to split the other 2 games when it came to going to Texas Tech, BYU at home, Arizona at home, at Iowa State. They went 3-1 in those games and went 4-1 over that 5-game stretch. So even though this game went awfully and they didn't play super well, I think that, or didn't play well at all, I still think that you come out of this 5-game stretch as a whole feeling a lot better about this team than you did going in, because I think there was definitely more sort of wait and see on this team before this stretch started. Dave might have been the only guy on the national title train before this 5-game stretch started. And now, like, Dave's got other people on there. Like, they got a dining car. And this train just keeps growing.
Yeah. Yeah. The train keeps getting bigger. And we're accepting new passengers also, even despite the game today. Look at Dave's here. He says choo-choo in the chat. There you go. Shout out to Dave. Thank you so much. Dave also said, what would the team be if Filan hadn't transferred? He's looking at Santa Bama. As it relates to the transfer portal stuff, I try not to think about it that way, because in this era, you just have to accept that guys are going to transfer, and that odds are at least a couple of them are going to end up being quality players at their next stop. And it is what it is, right? It just is what it is in this era.
I also think there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't necessarily look at, and you can't even necessarily trust interviews with guys when they're talking about why they transferred, because it's really easy for them to say, well, I would have gone there, but they brought in this guy and I was upset and left. Well, that might not actually be the case. They might have gotten more money to go somewhere else. Might have been their people didn't want them there in the first place and they wound up going somewhere else. And so I think that that's the tough thing about the transfer portal. Also, it's really easy to kind of like look at it in a vacuum, and it's tough to do that. Did you watch A&M Missouri earlier this week, Nick?
I did not catch it.
Zach Clements scored 20, Rylan Griffin scored 17, and A&M lost to Missouri anyway. And so it's like, and so I'm not blaming Clements and Rylan Griffin for doing that, but I am saying, like, would you rather have these guys who were on your team who are elsewhere and they're producing, or would you have the guys that are playing winning basketball with the team that you have now, the way that they're assembled, the way that they fit together? And so I realize one of the favorite things for everybody to do is say, what if you had these guys? What if you had those guys? What if we had these guys with these guys? It's just, that's not how it works a lot of the time. And a lot of the time you're thinking, hey, we could have paired this guy with this guy. Well, that wouldn't have happened because guy B wouldn't have come if guy A was still there or whatever.
Yeah. It's I think you end up just sort of talking in circles a lot of times when you try to get into all those hypotheticals of like, well, if LeBaron Philon is here, does that mean Marco Jackson's not? Would that be better or worse? What about all that's XYZ? If LeBaron Philon's here, does Melvin Council transfer into Kansas? I don't know, maybe not. It's like, yeah, you can. I think you can really exhaust yourself trying to dive through all that stuff. So, all right, Kansas up next. They're going to play on Wednesday night at Gallagher-Iba Arena against Oklahoma State on the road. I'm going to tell you right now, Kevin, I am worried about this Oklahoma State game.
It's a trap game. You finish this tough stretch. You've got tougher games. No offense to Oklahoma State, but you've got tougher games coming up, and Oklahoma State can absolutely play offense. And so there's a chance you go down to Stillwater and it's bombs away, and you're having to really fight. I think the thing that makes me a little less worried is maybe the way that this game went, because I get the feeling Bill Self is going to get this Kansas team refocused really quickly on the things that they need to do, from a defensive standpoint, the things that they need to do on the glass. And so I don't know that it's going to be, KU by 20 or anything like that, but I do think that this is going to be a game that Kansas is probably going to come back and respond pretty well in.
I hope so. Wednesday night on the road for Kansas against Oklahoma State before they get teed up for Saturday against Cincinnati. And then you're circling that upcoming stretch after that, Monday, February 23rd. You'll get Houston at home, and then you'll go at Arizona on Saturday, February 28th. Those are the next two really, really difficult marquee games for Kansas. So, beat Houston at home and maybe lose to Arizona, but maybe it's still fine. Gabriel in the chat says great stretch 4-1, Rock Chalk. Yep. I think, again, good assessment as well there. So, Kevin, any final thoughts here before we derail ourselves with another off-topic thing before we end the show?
Let's get the real Trey White back. I think that Darren Peterson, as they continue working with him, that's going to work out. I know Matthew was asking for a timeline. You really can't. They could look pretty good with him on offense next week. They could look pretty good with him on offense 2 weeks from now. It's one of those things that'll come together when it comes together. I remember thinking that KU was kind of figuring things out with the Russ Robb, Mario Chalmers backcourt. I think it was against Yale in a random game that most people wouldn't circle. And so it happens when it happens. With Trey White, I'd like to see him get back to being the aggressive guy, the guy who gets the ball in his hands and he's looking to make something happen with it, not pass that thing off. And so I really think if KU can get that Trey White back, then this is going to be a blip, because he hasn't really shot the ball well, scored the last few games, but I think he's a very important player to this team because of what he does to impact winning. And I think getting that version of Trey White back would be a really nice step in the right direction. So,
Yeah, I think besides the obvious, Darren Peterson continues to play more and continues to look more comfortable. Like, I would echo everything you said about Trey White. He's definitely the guy that's kind of gone missing the most. I think Tiller has been a bit volatile, but he has shown, I think, a little bit more positively than negatively recently. Obviously, we know what you can get from Flory. Melvin has his role as well. So you look at Trey White, you look at getting more out of Darren Peterson, and then obviously I think when you look to the bench, you saw Cole Rosario get some points in this game today. Maybe that's something that can build his confidence a little bit. Marco Jackson, we talked about the game that he had and how in the second half he played pretty well. So you get more from your bench and you keep this thing moving through the rest of conference play. Wednesday night against Oklahoma State. It's another 8 p.m. game, so it'll be a late night Wednesday. We should be live, though. Kevin, is that going to work for you, live Wednesday night after the game?
I think so.
Okay. Well, sometimes I forget to ask you before we start the show, and I don't want to just go here and be like, and we are 100% going to be live, and then you're like, actually I can't. I was like, okay, well, whatever. But
yeah, we'll have to move verbal commitment around again.
Yeah, that is true. We'll have to work on that. So, but yeah, we'll be live after the game Wednesday night. It'll be a late one. You can come hang out with us on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you're watching, you can like the video, drop comments after the fact, all that good stuff. But join us live Wednesday night. We'll be live around 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock tip for Kansas. So by 10:15, 10:20, you can expect us to be live reacting to KU and Oklahoma State. Until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon. See ya.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.